Kyle Larson may have just walked away from one of the biggest promises of his career, and if you missed the quote, you missed the real turning point. For years, fans believed they knew exactly how Larson's NASCAR story would end. He had said back in 2018 that he wanted to step away from the Cup Series before turning 40 and go chase a full-time wing sprint car championship on dirt. That idea followed him for nearly a decade, and a lot of people assumed it was still the plan. But now, with one honest answer before Iowa, Larson has made it clear that the future is no longer heading in that direction. And if you enjoy stories that go deeper than the headline, subscribe to NASCAR Report today, because this one says a lot about where Larson's life and career are really going. To understand why this matters, you have to go back to the version of Kyle Larson people were talking about in 2018. At the time, he was still with Chip Ganassi Racing, still trying to break through as one of NASCAR's elite drivers, and still hearing constant questions about where his heart really was. When he said he wanted to leave Cup racing before 40 and chase a sprint car title, a lot of NASCAR fans took it personally. They heard it as a driver admitting that stock car racing was just the job while dirt was the real passion. In a sport where fans give their weekends, money, and emotions to the drivers they follow, that rubbed people the wrong way. Larson later pushed back and made it clear he loved NASCAR, loved competing every week, and loved the atmosphere around the series. But what got lost in all of that is that the comment came from a driver who still felt boxed in. Back then, his dirt schedule was much more restricted, and it is not hard to see why a racer like Larson would daydream about a future with complete freedom. Then everything changed when he got to Hendrick Motorsports. Instead of feeling like he had to choose between NASCAR and dirt, Larson suddenly had a team owner in Rick Hendrick who trusted him enough to let him do both. That shift changed everything. Once Larson had the freedom to keep racing on dirt while still running full-time in the Cup Series, the need to someday escape NASCAR started to fade. And the results since then have been ridiculous. Larson has stacked up the biggest achievements of his career in both worlds. Since joining Hendrick, he has added the bulk of his Cup wins, won championships in 2021 and 2025, captured 3 Knoxville Nationals, 3 Chili Bowls, and a King's Royal, taken on the Indianapolis 500 twice, and even helped launch High Limit Racing as a co-owner. In other words, he didn't have to leave NASCAR to live out his dirt racing life. He built a version of his career where both sides could exist at once. That is why his old plan quietly stopped making sense. The dream of leaving was born when he felt fenced in. Once the fence came down, so did the urgency to go somewhere else. The next major clue came in February, when Larson signed a 5-year extension with Hendrick Motorsports that keeps him in the number 5 through the 2031 season. HendrickCars.com also signed a matching extension, and crew chief Cliff Daniels signed a multi-year deal to stay with him. That contract takes Larson right to the edge of that old 40-year benchmark, which is why so many people assumed the original dirt plan was still alive. But even then, there were hints that his thinking had changed. Rick Hendrick openly said he would have signed Larson for life if Larson had wanted it, and Larson made it pretty clear that he sees no reason to be anywhere else. So even before this latest interview, the idea that he was still counting down the days until he could leave NASCAR was already looking weaker. Then came the answer that changed the conversation. When Larson was asked recently whether he still wanted to chase a sprint car championship before turning 40, he said 40 is now simply the next milestone, and when he gets there, he will decide whether he wants to keep going or stop. Then came the bigger part. He said it depends on where his kids are in their lives and what they are interested in. That is the line that matters most, because it completely shifts the center of his future. Not money, not sponsors, not a contract, not even one last championship chase somewhere else. Larson flat out said he has changed his mind about competing for a sprint car championship. He explained that he has already accomplished so much since making those original comments that he no longer feels driven by the idea of a full season title. And honestly, when you look at what he has already won on dirt, that makes sense. A season-long championship is meaningful, but Larson has already conquered many of the biggest events in the discipline. When you have won the Knoxville Nationals 3 times, won the Chili Bowl 3 times, won the King's Royal, and proven you can show up in major races and beat the best, it is fair to ask what exactly a points title would add that your resume does not already say. Larson answered that question himself. He basically said he does not know what a sprint car championship would do for his career anymore. That is a huge statement, because for years people talked about that title like it was some unfinished piece of his identity. Now he is saying it may not be unfinished at all. And then he said something else that tells you exactly where his priorities are moving. He brought up the idea of committing to an 80 or 90 race sprint car schedule and basically said that is not appealing to him now, especially with his kids likely to be busy with their own racing by then. Think about how important that is. This is Kyle Larson, one of the busiest racers in the world. A guy who runs the full NASCAR schedule, races dirt in between, has taken on the Indy 500, and stays deeply involved in high-limit racing. If that guy looks at a full-time dirt schedule and says that sounds like too much, then this is not about whether he still loves racing. It is about how he wants to spend the hours of his life. And that is where the story gets more personal than most people expected. Larson is not just thinking like a driver anymore. He is thinking like a dad in a racing family. His kids are growing up around the sport, and they are getting old enough for racing to become a serious part of their own lives. So if he reaches 40 and the choice is between spending nearly every weekend chasing his own points title or being there to watch, support, and help guide his kids through their early racing years, it sounds like he is no longer sure the first option wins. That is what makes this such a major shift. For a long time, the imagined ending to Larson's career was dramatic. Leave NASCAR, go back to dirt full-time, and chase one more giant accomplishment. But the ending he is hinting at now is quieter and maybe even more meaningful. Instead of leaving NASCAR for another title run, he may eventually step back so he can be present for the next generation of racers in his own family. And if that is true, then the people who may have the biggest say in the final chapter of Kyle Larson's career are not team owners, manufacturers, or sponsors. It is his kids. That is a powerful change, because it means the timeline is no longer about legacy in the traditional sense. It is about balance. It is about time. It is about deciding what matters most after you have already won enough to prove who you are. And when you put that next to Larson's other recent comments, it becomes even clearer. Not long ago, he also agreed with Scott Dixon's criticism that many NASCAR Cup races are simply too long, saying 3 hours is too long in today's sports world. That comment got people fired up, but it fits this same pattern perfectly. Larson is being unusually honest right now about how he sees the sport, how he sees the schedule, and how he sees the value of his time. Put all of it together, and this does not sound like a driver mapping out one final giant chase. It sounds like a driver taking a hard look at the cost of every extra commitment. In 2018, Larson's future looked like a straight line toward a full-time dirt championship. In 2026, that line has bent in a different direction. He still loves racing. He still loves dirt. He still wants to compete. But now there is something else in the equation, and it may be stronger than all the old plans. Being there for his family when their own racing journeys really begin. So the question is no longer whether Kyle Larson can win enough before 40 to justify leaving NASCAR. The question is whether, when that milestone arrives, he will decide he has already done enough for himself and wants to spend the next chapter helping the people he loves chase their own dreams. And honestly, after everything he has already accomplished, that might be the most complete ending possible. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to NASCAR Report today. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support would truly mean a lot to us.